Roberts noticed the air recycler making that sound again, the one that meant trouble in about 6 hours if nobody did anything about it. He grabbed his toolkit and headed down the corridor, his boots clanging against the metal floor of the station. "Where are you going?" Lou asked, looking up from her datapad. "Section 7, the recycler is acting up." "Again?" "That's the 3rd time this month," Roberts shrugged. "Yeah, well, these systems weren't designed to handle this many people. We're at double capacity now. Things break." Lou stood up and grabbed her own tools. "I'll come with you. Patel is already down there checking the pressure valves." They walked through the busy corridors of the station. Aliens from a dozen different species moved past them, going about their daily work. Some nodded at the humans. Others ignored them. That was normal life on a council station orbiting the mining colony below. When they reached Section 7, Patel was already elbow-deep in the access panel. His shirt was soaked with sweat. The temperature in this section always ran hot. "Found the problem," Patel said without looking up. "The flow regulator is installed backwards." "Backwards?" Roberts leaned in to look. "How is that even possible?" "Because whoever installed it didn't understand how human breathing works. They just followed the diagram. But the diagram was made for Trill physiology, not ours." Lou pulled out her scanner and ran it over the system. "If we don't fix this, the carbon dioxide levels in the human quarters will hit dangerous levels by tonight. So we fix it," Roberts said simply. "That's not protocol," a voice said behind them. They turned to see Bryn, one of their alien crewmates. He looked like a giant mantis, with multiple arms and large compound eyes. He was holding a regulation manual. "Protocol says we need to file a maintenance request, wait for approval, then wait for certified technicians to arrive," Bryn continued. "That takes 3 days minimum," Patel said. "We'll all be dead by then." "The protocol exists for safety reasons," Roberts sighed. "Bryn, buddy, we know you're just doing your job. But sometimes the protocol is wrong. We're not going to let people suffocate while we wait for paperwork." Bryn's antenna twitched with concern, but he said nothing more. He simply watched as the 3 humans began their work. It took them 40 minutes to reverse the regulator and recalibrate the system. They also strengthened 3 weak connections and replaced a worn gasket. When they finished, the air in Section 7 smelled fresher almost immediately. "There," Liu said, closing the panel. "That should hold for another few months at least. Until they overload the system again," Patel muttered. They cleaned up their tools and headed back to their quarters. Behind them, Bryn made notes in his datapad. He'd been doing that a lot lately, recording all their unauthorized modifications. 2 days later, Roberts woke to the sound of his door being forced open. Council enforcement officers poured into his small room. They were Trill, the species that made up most of the council's leadership. Tall, gray-skinned, with 3 fingers on each hand. "Engineer Roberts, you're under arrest," one of them announced. "For what?" "Unauthorized modification of station systems. 17 counts." They pulled him out of bed and put restraints on his wrists. In the corridor, he saw Liu and Patel being arrested too. Both looked as confused as he felt. "This is insane," Liu shouted. "We were preventing disasters. You violated protocol. The law is clear." They were marched through the station. Everyone stopped to watch. Roberts saw Bryn in the crowd, his antenna drooping. The mantis-like alien looked guilty. Doral pushed through the crowd. He was a reptilian alien covered in blue-green scales. He worked as a pilot on the station. "What's happening?" Doral demanded. "These humans have committed multiple violations of council engineering regulations," the lead officer explained. "They will be transported to the detention facility on the homeworld for processing." "But they saved lives." Doral protested. "That is not relevant to the charges. They were taken to a shuttle and loaded inside." Through the window, Roberts watched the station grow smaller as they left. He wondered what would happen to all the systems they'd been secretly maintaining. All the little fixes and adjustments that kept everything running smoothly. "This is bad," Patel said quietly. "Yeah," Lou agreed. Roberts said nothing. He just watched the station disappear into the distance and hoped someone would figure things out. Back on the station, Doral found Bryn in the maintenance office. The mantis was staring at his datapad, his multiple arms trembling. "Did you report them?" Doral asked. "I followed protocol. I documented the violations. I thought they would just get a warning, maybe a fine. I didn't think they would arrest them. You should have known better." "I followed the rules." Doral's tail lashed in anger. "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the rules are wrong. He stormed out, leaving Bryn alone with his guilt and his protocols. In the engineering bay, a warning light began to blink, then another, then 3 more. Without the humans, nobody noticed. Or if they did, they didn't know what to do about it. They would need to file maintenance requests and wait for certified technicians. By then, it might be too late. The detention facility smelled wrong. Roberts couldn't quite put his finger on it, but everything about this place felt hostile to human life. The gravity was too heavy, the temperature too cold. The food they brought tasted like chemicals mixed with dirt. Liu was in the cell next to his. Patel was somewhere down the hall. They could talk through the ventilation system if they kept their voices low. "How are you holding up?" Roberts asked into the vent. "I've been better," Liu's voice came back, thin and tired. "My joints are killing me. This gravity is brutal." "Yeah, mine too. Do you think they'll let us go?" "Eventually. Once they realize how stupid this is." But Roberts wasn't sure he believed that. The council didn't like admitting mistakes. Back on the station, things were falling apart faster than anyone expected. Bryn stood in the engineering bay, staring at a wall of flashing warning lights. He'd been trained in proper maintenance procedures. He knew the protocols by heart, but none of it seemed to work the way it should. "I don't understand," he said to himself. "I'm following every step exactly." Doral entered the bay, his scales looking duller than usual. "What's wrong now?" "The water purification system. I'm running the standard diagnostic, but it keeps saying everything is fine. But the water pressure is dropping. Did you check the secondary filters?" "There are no secondary filters listed in the schematic." Doral moved closer and looked at the system. "Then why are there secondary filters installed right there?" Bryn followed his pointing claw. Sure enough, there were additional components that weren't in any official diagram. Those shouldn't be there. They're not part of the original design. The humans must have added them. Without authorization? Obviously. Doral examined the filters more closely. And look, they're completely clogged. When was the last time someone cleaned these? Never, because officially they don't exist. They stared at each other as the realization hit them both. The humans hadn't just been fixing things. They'd been improving systems that were poorly designed in the first place. And they'd been maintaining those improvements constantly without anyone noticing. "How many other systems have they modified?" Bryn asked quietly. Over the next week, they found out. Nearly every major system on the station had human fingerprints all over it. Extra safety valves that prevented pressure buildups. Redundant power connections that kicked in during failures. Modified sensor arrays that caught problems early. Hundreds of small changes that the official schematics knew nothing about. And now, without the humans to maintain them, everything was slowly breaking down. Bryn tried to contact the council to explain the situation. He filed 17 different reports. He requested emergency assistance. He begged them to at least let him speak with the imprisoned engineers. The response came back in formal legal language. "Your request has been denied. The arrested individuals are awaiting trial. No contact is permitted. Continue following standard protocols for all maintenance issues." "Standard protocols are killing us," Bryn shouted at his screen. A small crowd had gathered in the engineering bay. Word was spreading about what was happening. Aliens from different species, all of them looking worried. "My quarters are freezing," one of them said. "The temperature control stopped working yesterday." "The gravity in Section 9 is fluctuating," another added. "Someone got hurt when it suddenly increased." "The air tastes stale in the dining area." Bryn listened to all of them and felt his frustration growing. "I'm doing everything the manual says to do." "Maybe the manual is wrong," Doral suggested. "The manual can't be wrong. It was written by experts." "Was it?" Doral pulled up a file on his datapad. "I've been doing research. The lead designer of this station never actually worked on a mixed species habitat before. He made assumptions. A lot of assumptions. And apparently a lot of those assumptions were wrong. Then how has this station been functioning at all? Because the humans fixed all the problems quietly, without bothering anyone, without asking for permission or credit." Bryn felt something unfamiliar stirring inside him. It wasn't quite anger yet, but it was close. He'd always believed in the system. He'd always trusted that following the rules would lead to good outcomes. But now he was watching everything fall apart because the rules were inadequate. Meanwhile, in the detention facility, Roberts had made friends with a guard. Not because the guard was friendly, but because Roberts had noticed the guard's desk light flickering. That's going to burn out soon, Roberts mentioned during one of his meal deliveries. The guard looked at the light. So? So when it burns out, the replacement parts take 3 weeks to arrive. I know because I saw your supply schedule when I was being processed. You'll be working in the dark for almost a month. The guard seemed unconcerned. I will file a requisition form. Or I could fix it now. Takes 5 minutes. I can see the problem from here. Loose connection in the power coupling. You are a prisoner. You cannot be allowed to access station systems. Roberts shrugged. Suit yourself. Enjoy the darkness, but 2 days later when the light finally died, the guard came to Roberts' cell with a toolbox. Fix it, he said. Quickly, Roberts smiled. Sure thing. It took him 3 minutes. While he worked, he also noticed that the environmental controls in the guard station were miscalibrated. He adjusted those too, and he tightened a loose panel that had been rattling, and he rerouted a coolant line that was kinked. The guard watched all of this with growing confusion. Why do you do more than asked? Because I'm an engineer. I see problems, I fix them. It's who I am. The guard said nothing more, but he looked thoughtful as he escorted Roberts back to his cell. The council representative arrived on the station with an air of supreme confidence. His name was Torin, and he carried himself like someone who had never been wrong about anything in his entire life. He wore the silver robes of a senior bureaucrat and spoke in the slow, measured tones of someone used to being obeyed. I understand there have been some operational difficulties, he said to the assembled crew in the main conference room. Bryn stood at the front of the room, his multiple arms clenched in frustration. Around him, dozens of crew members watched and waited. Some of them looked angry. Others just looked tired. Difficulties? Bryn repeated. We're barely keeping this station functional. I'm sure that's an exaggeration. It's not. Bryn pulled up a holographic display showing system status across the entire station. Red warnings dominated the screen. Life support is operating at 60% efficiency. Water purification is failing. Power distribution is unstable. 3 sections have been sealed off due to atmospheric contamination, and yesterday someone was injured when artificial gravity failed in the cargo bay. Torin examined the display with mild interest. I see you've filed maintenance requests for all of these issues. Yes, 3 weeks ago. We've received no response. These things take time. There are proper procedures that must be followed. That was when Bryn snapped. He'd been holding back his anger for weeks, trying to be professional, trying to follow the rules, but something inside him finally broke. You locked up human engineers, he shouted. His voice echoed through the conference room. Several crew members jumped at the sudden outburst. Do you have any idea what they were actually doing? Torin blinked slowly. They were violating 17 separate engineering regulations. The evidence is quite clear. The evidence is clear that they were keeping us alive. Bryn's voice rose even higher. Every single one of those violations was preventing a disaster. They weren't breaking the rules for fun. They were breaking them because the rules were inadequate. That's quite an accusation. It's the truth. Bryn pulled up another display. This one showed a detailed timeline. 3 months ago, the humans modified the air recycler in Section 7. Do you know why? Because it was installed backwards and would have suffocated the entire human crew within 8 hours. But fixing it violated Regulation 47, Subsection 12. He changed the display again. 2 months ago, they added redundant power couplings to the medical bay. Unauthorized modification. But last week, when the main power grid failed, those couplings kept life support running for the patients in critical care. Without them, 6 people would have died. Bryn moved through example after example, each one showing a human violation, each one showing lives saved. The room grew quieter as he spoke. Even Torin seemed to be paying closer attention. They added backup sensors to the reactor monitoring system. Violation. Those sensors detected a coolant leak 2 weeks ago that your official sensors missed. They reinforced structural supports in the docking bay. Violation. Those supports prevented a hull breach during a docking accident. They modified the water purification system to handle the increased population. Violation. Without those modifications, we'd all be on strict water rationing right now. Doral stood up from his seat. The humans never asked for credit. They never demanded special treatment. They just quietly fixed problems that nobody else even noticed existed. That doesn't excuse breaking the law, Torin said, but his voice had less certainty now. Your laws are broken. Bryn slammed one of his hands on the table. This station was designed by people who had never lived on it. They made assumptions. They cut corners. They followed regulations that looked good on paper but didn't work in reality. The humans understood this. They adapted. They improvised. They made things actually work. More crew members began speaking up. A small alien with 6 legs raised her voice. The humans fixed the temperature control in my quarters. I'd been filing complaints for months. Nothing happened. They fixed it in an afternoon. Another voice from the back. They showed me how to calibrate the sensor array properly. The official training manual was completely wrong. They upgraded the waste recycling system so it actually processed organic matter correctly. They reprogrammed the elevator. Safety protocols after someone got trapped for 6 hours. They added emergency shutoffs to the coolant system. The stories kept coming. Dozens of them. Hundreds of small fixes and improvements that the humans had made. All unauthorized. All necessary. Torin held up his hand for silence. Even if everything you're saying is true, it doesn't change the fact that they broke the law. We can't simply ignore regulations because they're inconvenient. Then change the regulations. Bryn's voice cracked with emotion. Because right now your precious laws are going to get us all killed. Without those humans, this station is failing. We've followed every protocol. We've done everything by the book. And it's not working. Nothing is working. I'll need to review the situation more carefully, Torin said stiffly. There's no time for review. We need those engineers back now. That's impossible. They're awaiting trial. The legal process must be followed. Bryn looked around the room at his fellow crew members. He saw the same anger on their faces that he felt in his hearts. These weren't just statistics to them. They'd worked alongside the humans, laughed with them, learned from them, and now those friends were locked away while bureaucrats debated regulations. Then we'll go get them ourselves, Bryn said quietly. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at him. You can't be serious, Torin said. I'm completely serious. Bryn looked at Doral. How many crew members do you think would volunteer for an unauthorized rescue mission? Doral smiled, showing all his teeth. All of them. Hands and claws and appendages rose throughout the room. Every single person volunteered, even some who had barely known the humans, because this wasn't just about 3 engineers anymore. It was about something bigger. It was about loyalty, about friendship, about doing what was right instead of what was legal. Torin stood up, his robes rustling. This is madness. You'll all be arrested. You'll face criminal charges. Fine, Bryn said. Arrest us, charge us. Do whatever you want. But we're not leaving our friends to rot in your prison while this station falls apart. The humans taught us something important. Sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that breaks the rules. He looked around the room one more time. Who's with me? The response was unanimous and deafening. The shuttle's engines hummed as it approached the detention facility. Doral sat in the pilot's seat, his claws dancing over the controls. Behind him, Bryn and 15 other crew members checked their equipment. None of them were soldiers. They were mechanics, technicians, cooks, and clerks. But they were determined. Security protocols are old, Doral muttered, studying his scanner. This facility was built 200 years ago, never upgraded. Can you get us in? Bryn asked. Can I get us in? I'm insulted you even have to ask. Doral's tail swished with confidence. The real question is whether we can get out again with 3 humans and without getting shot. One problem at a time. They landed at a cargo dock on the far side of the facility. Doral had falsified their identification codes, listing them as a routine supply delivery. The automated systems accepted the codes without question. See? Doral said. Old security. No imagination. They made their way through the facility's outer corridors. Twice they had to hide from patrols. Once they had to bypass a locked door. Each time, Bryn found himself thinking about how a human would solve the problem. And each time, the solution came easier than he expected. The cell block was deep in the facility's core. Heavy doors, armed guards, surveillance cameras. Bryn's confidence began to waver. This is harder than I thought, he whispered. Then let's think like humans, Doral suggested. What would Roberts do? Probably something crazy. Exactly. Doral walked straight up to the guard station, bold as anything. Bryn wanted to pull him back but forced himself to trust his friend. Emergency maintenance required, Doral announced to the surprised guards. Atmospheric contamination detected in cell block 7. We've received no alert, one guard said. Because the sensors are malfunctioning. That's the problem. I'm here to fix them before the contamination spreads. The guards looked at each other uncertainly. Bryn held his breath. This was the moment. Either they'd believe the lie, or they'd all get arrested. Fine, the guard said finally. But be quick. They were in. Bryn couldn't believe it worked. As they walked down the cell block, he whispered to Doral. That was brilliant. That was human thinking. Sometimes the best solution is the simplest one. Just act like you belong. They found Roberts in cell 47. He looked thinner than Bryn remembered. His face was pale, but his eyes lit up when he saw them. You came, Roberts said. Of course we came. Did you think we'd leave you here? The thought had crossed my mind. Bryn began working on the cell lock. It was old technology, mechanical rather than electronic. Where are Lou and Patel? Lou is 3 cells down. Patel is in the next block. But listen, you need to know something. The waste recycling system in this facility is about to fail catastrophically. I've been trying to tell the guards, but nobody listens. That's not our priority right now. It should be. When it fails, toxic gases will flood this entire level. Guards, prisoners, everyone. You've got maybe 2 hours. Doral and Bryn exchanged looks. Can you fix it? If you let me out, yes. The lock clicked open. Robert stepped out of his cell, stretching his cramped muscles. They quickly freed Liu and Patel. Both humans looked as worn down as Robert's, but their spirits lifted when they realized what was happening. Unauthorized prison break, Liu said with a weak smile. I like it. We need to move fast, Bryn urged. Wait, Robert said. Give me 10 minutes with the recycling system first. Are you insane? We need to leave. And leave everyone here to die? Guards included? That's not who we are. Bryn wanted to argue, but he knew Roberts was right. That was the human way. Fix the problem even when it wasn't your problem, even when you had every reason to walk away. They found the recycling system 2 levels down. Roberts took one look at it and started laughing. What's funny? Patel asked. This is exactly the same design flaw as the one on the station. Same backwards installation. Same inadequate safety margins. These people never learn. Roberts, Liu, and Patel worked together with practiced efficiency. They moved like parts of a single machine, anticipating each other's needs, communicating in half sentences and gestures. Watching them, Bryn finally understood what made humans special. It wasn't any one skill. It was how they worked together, how they adapted, how they never gave up. There, Roberts said, closing the access panel. That should hold for another few years at least. I also fixed about 6 other problems while I was in there. Of course you did, Doral said, amused. They made their way back toward the shuttle, but alarms began blaring. Someone had discovered the empty cells. Run! Bryn shouted. They sprinted through corridors, guards shouting behind them. Liu pulled out a device from her pocket. When Bryn gave her a questioning look, she grinned. Made it in my cell from spare parts. Basic electromagnetic pulse generator. Been saving it for an emergency. She activated the device. The lights flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, but it was dim and sporadic. In the confusion, they reached the shuttle and piled inside. Doral launched them away from the facility with illegal acceleration. Warning messages filled the screen as facility defense systems tried to target them. But the old sensors couldn't track their erratic flight path. That was too close, Bryn said, breathing hard. That was amazing, Doral countered. We actually did it. Robert sat in the back of the shuttle, already examining a data pad. We need to get back to the station fast. According to these readings, the main reactor is showing instability. How bad? Bad enough that we need to be there yesterday. Liu looked at her own scanner. He's right. Core temperature is rising. If it continues, we're looking at a meltdown within 12 hours. 12 hours? Bryn felt panic rising. That's not enough time to evacuate everyone. We're not evacuating, Roberts said firmly. We're fixing it. Patel nodded in agreement. Just get us back there. We'll handle the rest. Doral pushed the shuttle's engines to maximum. The whole craft shook with the strain. Hold on, this is going to be a rough ride. Behind them, the detention facility grew smaller. Ahead, the station waited, broken and dying. But help was coming. The humans were coming home. The station was dying. Anyone could see it. The lights flickered constantly. The air smelled stale and wrong. Strange noises echoed through the corridors as systems strained and failed. People moved through the halls with worried expressions, jumping at every sound. In the command center, council experts stood around holographic displays, arguing about proper procedures. They'd arrived 2 days ago, sent to address the maintenance crisis. So far, they'd made everything worse. The protocol clearly states we must shut down and restart the reactor, one expert insisted. That could take 18 hours, another argued. We don't have that kind of time. Then what do you suggest? I suggest we follow procedure. They were still arguing when the shuttle arrived. Roberts was the first one through the airlock, followed by Liu, Patel, and the rescue team. He didn't stop to explain. He didn't ask permission. He just headed straight for the reactor control room. A council expert tried to block his path. You're not authorized to be here. You're under arrest. Roberts pushed past him without breaking stride. Arrest me later. Right now, I have work to do. Liu and Patel followed, with Bryn and Doral running interference to keep the officials back. The command center erupted in chaos as more security personnel arrived. In the reactor control room, Roberts studied the readings with growing alarm. This is worse than I thought. Temperature is past critical threshold. Containment field is fluctuating. How long do we have? Liu asked. Maybe 6 hours, maybe less. That's not enough time to do this properly. Then we'll do it improperly. Roberts grinned despite the situation. That's kind of our specialty. Patel was already pulling up system schematics. The cooling system is completely inadequate for current power demands. We need more flow. The pumps are already at maximum, Liu pointed out. Then we bypass the limiters, reroute coolant from non-essential systems, strip every spare bit of cooling capacity from across the entire station. That's going to make life uncomfortable for a lot of people. Better uncomfortable than dead. They worked with desperate speed. Roberts coordinated the effort, calling out instructions. Liu hacked into systems that were supposedly secure, rerouting power and resources without bothering with authorization codes. Patel physically rewired connections, his hands moving faster than seemed possible. Bryn watched in amazement. The council experts had been studying the problem for 2 days and gotten nowhere. The humans had been working for 20 minutes and were already making progress. I want to help, Bryn said. Roberts glanced at him. Can you handle high-voltage systems? I'm certified. Forget certification. Can you actually do it? Yes, then get over here. I need you to bypass the safety interlocks on Power Junction 12. That's against regulation. Bryn. Roberts looked at him seriously. Do you trust me? Yes, then forget the regulations. Just this once. Trust yourself instead. Bryn felt something shift inside him. He moved to the power junction and began working. At first, he tried to follow proper procedure. But the procedure was too slow. So he stopped thinking about rules and started thinking about results. What needed to happen? How could he make it happen? The work went faster, easier. It felt almost liberating to ignore the regulations and just solve the problem. More crew members arrived, offering to help. Doral organized them into teams, sending them throughout the station to implement the humans' instructions. Soon dozens of people were working together, all of them breaking rules, all of them focused on a single goal. The council experts tried to shut down the operation. This is madness. You're violating every safety protocol. Your safety protocols are killing us, someone shouted back. The argument escalated. Security personnel didn't know whose orders to follow. Some tried to stop the humans. Others decided to help them. The command center descended into controlled chaos. Then, suddenly, alarms stopped. The temperature readings began to drop. Slowly at first, then faster. The reactor was stabilizing. Roberts let out a long breath. That's it. We're past the crisis point. Are you sure? Liu asked. Look at the readings. Temperature dropping. Containment field solid. We did it. A cheer went up from the crew members who'd been helping. Even some of the security personnel looked relieved. The council experts just looked confused, but the work wasn't done. Now that the immediate crisis was past, Roberts turned his attention to everything else. He walked through the station like a force of nature, fixing problems that had been accumulating for weeks. Liu and Patel followed with growing numbers of crew members helping. They repaired the air recyclers, recalibrated the water purification systems, fixed the power distribution network, replaced worn components, upgraded inadequate systems, made improvements, added redundancies, implemented solutions. Bryn worked alongside them, learning with every task. The humans didn't just fix things. They taught while they worked. They explained their reasoning. They shared their knowledge. They turned repairs into lessons. Why did you add that extra valve? Bryn asked Roberts at one point. Because the original design doesn't account for pressure spikes. This valve will bleed off excess pressure automatically. One less thing to worry about. That's not in the specifications. Specifications are guidelines, not gospel. They're written by people who've never actually lived on these stations. We're the ones who know what actually works. By the time they finished, the station felt different. The air smelled cleaner. The lights burned steady. The strange noises were gone. Everything hummed with quiet efficiency. In the command center, Torrin stood with the other council officials watching reports flow in. Every system was green. Better than green. The station was operating at higher efficiency than it had ever achieved, even when it was new. How is this possible? One expert muttered. Because they're not just engineers, Bryn said. He'd followed the humans back to the command center. They're problem solvers. They don't ask whether something is allowed. They ask whether it works. And if it doesn't work, they make it work. But they broke countless regulations and saved countless lives. Bryn turned to face Torrin directly. Tell me, which matters more? Following rules or keeping people safe? Torrin had no answer. Behind him, Liu was already at work on another system, improving something that didn't need improving just because she could see how to make it better. Patel was teaching a group of crew members his techniques. Roberts was reviewing schematics, marking places where future improvements could be made. They never stopped. They never quit. They never said it was good enough. They just kept making things better. The hearing was held in the Grand Council chamber on the homeworld. The room was designed to intimidate, with high ceilings and serious-faced officials sitting in judgment. Roberts, Liu, and Patel stood in the center, still wearing their work clothes, still dirty from their repairs. Around them, the gallery was packed. News of the station crisis had spread. Hundreds of aliens from dozens of species had come to watch. Some were curious. Many were angry. All of them were interested in what would happen to the humans who'd broken so many rules. The lead counselor, an ancient trill named Veron, studied the three humans with unreadable eyes. He'd been on the council for 40 years. He'd seen everything, or so he thought. You stand accused of multiple violations of council engineering regulations, Veron began. How do you plead? Guilty, Roberts said simply. We broke the rules. We knew we were breaking them. We did it anyway. A murmur ran through the gallery. Veron leaned forward. You don't deny it? Why would we? It's all true. We modified systems without authorization. We ignored safety protocols. We violated regulations, all of it. Every single charge, and then this hearing should be brief. The penalty for such violations is clear. Hold on. Bryn stood up from the gallery. Permission to speak? Veron looked annoyed. This is not standard procedure. Nothing about this case is standard. Bryn walked to the center of the chamber. He was nervous, but his voice was steady. Before you pass judgment, the council should know what these violations actually accomplished. We have reviewed the technical reports. Then you know that every single violation prevented a disaster. That without these modifications, the station would have failed months ago. That hundreds of lives were saved by these rule breakers. That may be true, but it doesn't excuse lawlessness. We have regulations for important reasons, do we? Bryn pulled out a datapad. Let me tell you about Regulation 47, subsection 12. It states that all atmospheric systems must follow the original manufacturer specifications. Sounds reasonable, right? Except the original specifications were designed for a station with 200 occupants. Our station has 400. Following that regulation would have killed half the crew through carbon dioxide poisoning. The humans broke that regulation and saved our lives. Veron frowned. If the regulation was inadequate, the proper procedure would be to file a modification request, which takes 6 months to process. We would have been dead in 6 hours. More voices joined from the gallery. One by one, crew members stood up to share their stories. The temperature controls that didn't work until humans fixed them. The power systems that failed until humans added redundancies. The sensor arrays that missed critical problems until humans upgraded them. Doral spoke about the rescue mission and how the humans had still found time to fix the detention facility's failing systems. They could have left everyone there to die. They had every reason to, but they didn't, because that's not who they are. The testimonies continued. Technical experts who'd studied the human modifications and found them brilliant. Station commanders who admitted their facilities only functioned because humans had quietly fixed fundamental design flaws. Even some council members spoke up, admitting they'd personally benefited from unauthorized human repairs. Veron tried to maintain order, but the chamber was in chaos. Finally, he called for silence. These testimonies are compelling, he admitted, but they don't address the fundamental issue. If we allow individuals to ignore regulations whenever they feel justified, we'll have chaos. There must be order. There must be rules. There must be wisdom, Roberts said. Everyone turned to look at him. Your rules were created by smart people trying to solve problems. But they weren't created by people living those problems. They were theoretical, abstract, and reality doesn't care about theory. He gestured at the assembled crowd. Every person in this room lives in a station or a ship or a facility that was designed by someone who never had to live in it. And every single one of those places has problems. Real problems. Daily problems. Problems that won't wait 6 months for official approval to fix. Liu stepped forward. You can punish us if you want. Throw us back in prison. But the problems won't go away. Your stations will keep failing. Your ships will keep breaking. Because your regulations are too slow, too rigid, and too far removed from reality. So what do you suggest? Veron asked. That we abandon all regulations? Let everyone do whatever they want? No, Patel said. We suggest you trust the people doing the work. Give them the authority to solve problems as they arise. Create guidelines instead of rigid rules. Allow for adaptation, for improvement, for common sense. That's a radical change. The universe is a radical place. Either your systems adapt or they die. There's no middle ground. Veron was quiet for a long time. The entire chamber waited. Finally, he spoke. This council has always prided itself on order and procedure, but perhaps we have confused order with effectiveness. Perhaps we have valued rules over results. He looked at the humans. Your violations are still violations, but your actions saved lives. Countless lives. And that cannot be ignored. He conferred with the other council members in hushed voices. The debate went on for several minutes. Then Veron turned back to face the chamber. The charges against Roberts, Liu, and Patel are dismissed. Furthermore, this council recognizes a new position within our engineering corps, Adaptive Systems Specialist. These specialists will have the authority to make necessary modifications to systems when immediate action is required. They will work outside normal regulations but will be held accountable for their results. A cheer went up from the gallery. The humans looked relieved but not surprised. They'd been confident in their work all along. However, Veron continued, we cannot simply ignore all regulations. We need people who understand both the necessity of rules and the value of adaptation. People who can bridge that gap. He looked at Bryn. Would you be willing to lead this new department? Bryn's antenna twitched in surprise. Me? You understand the regulations, but you've also learned to think beyond them. You're the ideal choice. Bryn looked at the humans. Roberts nodded encouragingly. You'd be good at it. I accept, Bryn said. The hearing concluded with new policies being drafted. Regulations would be reviewed and updated. Engineers would receive more autonomy. Systems would be designed with adaptation in mind. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Later, back on the station, Roberts found Bryn in the engineering bay. The mantis-like alien was training a group of young engineers, teaching them both proper procedure and when to ignore it. You're a natural teacher, Roberts observed. I learned from the best. Bryn paused his lesson. I need to apologize for reporting you in the first place. You were following the rules. Can't fault you for that. The wrong rules. Rules aren't wrong or right. They're just tools. What matters is knowing when to use them and when to set them aside. Robert smiled. You know that now. Bryn looked at his students, then back at Roberts. The humans taught us something we'd forgotten. Sometimes the best solution isn't in the manual. Sometimes you have to write your own manual. Now you're getting it. They stood together, watching the next generation learn. The station hummed around them, efficient and stable. In the distance, stars turned slowly past the viewports. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but together humans and aliens were learning to face it, not with rigid rules or perfect plans, but with adaptation, creativity, and the courage to break a few rules when breaking them was the right thing to do.